It's important to go back to what we're discussing and say that the teacher's role is to be a guide and mentor, helping the student understand how to succeed in the social process they're in. Just listen to this sound so we can turn it off. Dr. Amira, right? Dr. Amira, right? No sound now. If there's something, please write. You've raised your hand 4 times, so I'm turning off the audio notifications. Just write in the chat, okay? Notifications are off. Dr. Amira, please write in the chat. I'll read and respond at the right time. The sound has come 4 times, so I've turned it off. Now back to the chat. Dr. Emil, I'm waiting for your participation or question here, okay? I'll return to my presentation and check back soon. To sum up, the teacher needs a strategy for managing the educational process that considers all students and their differences to ensure success while involving a greater role for the student. I've turned off the sound after 4 notifications. Back to the chat. Dr. Emil, I'm waiting for your input or question. I'll check back soon to see what you needed when you raised your hand. Teachers should manage the educational process by considering all students and their differences to ensure success. I'm breaking the rigidity of e-learning strategies, explaining how to achieve goals, what strategies are, and the e-learning environment and tools. Dr. Amira, do you need something? Are you raising your hand? So we say here in summary that the teacher must follow a strategy for managing the educational process that takes into account all students and the individual differences between learners in order to make this educational process successful, taking into account that this method includes a greater role for the student, meaning that it does not depend, as I am spoiling it. I'm talking the goal is to train you brainstorming, breaking the rigidity around e-learning strategies, explaining goal achievement strategies, e-learning environment, and available tools. My aim is to introduce you, not a 4-hour training. Sound is off, feel free. Sound came 4 times, thought there was a question. Ask in chat, I'll check. I have another device for chat. Teacher's method should consider individual differences. This is the first criterion. Okay, I've turned off the sound, so feel free. There's no problem. I just noticed the sound came to me 4 times, so I thought someone had a question. I mentioned that you could ask it in the chat, and I'll check the chat. I have another device to look at the chat. So I'm coming back to say that the teacher's choice of teaching method should fit and consider the individual differences among learners. Considering individual differences among learners is crucial in selecting a teaching strategy. Why? Because teachers aim to achieve educational goals and specific outcomes. If a method doesn't meet all students' needs, it creates a gap between high achievers and slower learners, leading to problems. Relying solely on lectures, which are one way, limits interaction. Some students may feel disconnected, preferring more engagement. Therefore, diversifying strategies is essential. I can ask questions in the chat, ensuring interaction. I want Dr. Enas, Dr. Amira, Dr. Fatima, and Dr. Asgad to engage and communicate. Activities and materials are necessary. If trainees leave without learning, they might just record the session. Individual differences mean some may leave as they came. It's a one-way direction with limited interaction through forums. Some trainees might ignore the training, preferring to speak and ask questions directly. I need to diversify strategies like engaging in chat and directing attention to Dr. Enas, Dr. Amira, Dr. Fatima, and Dr. Asgad. Interaction and communication are crucial, along with activities and materials. Trainees should not leave without learning. Individual differences exist. Some absorb content quickly, others rely on recordings. I must ensure attention is given to all, responding to chats and messages so they stay focused. Some might rely on recordings to catch up later. I want Dr. Enas to focus on my words and see what Dr. Amira wanted. I need to check in with Dr. Fatima, Dr. Asgad, and understand everyone's needs. Conversation is key. Interaction and communication are vital. Activities and materials are necessary. If a trainee leaves without learning, they might just record the session. Trainees differ. Some leave unchanged. I'm not being negative. I'm highlighting differences. Some absorb content in 4 hours. Others rely on recordings. I'm not being negative, noting individual differences. Some absorb these 4 hours, others revisit the recording. I need to focus on them. If someone talks or messages me, respond to help them focus. Some might say, I'm here, and if I miss something, I'll catch up later with the recording. There are differences among trainees, and the teacher must choose a method that considers these to achieve learning goals effectively. This depends on the teacher's strategy. Teaching strategies should consider individual differences. If the method is one-sided, I won't read what's written. We'll send it as a PDF later. But if the strategy is one-sided, it's insufficient. There are trainee differences, and the teacher must choose a method that takes these into account because they want to achieve learning goals. Well, the strategy for managing the education should consider differences. This part is crucial. I have something specific to say. Here, if the strategy is one-sided, it's insufficient. Teachers at Al-Qasim University must diversify. Dr. Lulu Alawais is the last colleague. Now moving on to the second part. In this second part, I mentioned that it's very important. If the method is one-sided, I'm not going to read what's written. I just want to tell you something specific. Keep this written material in mind. Later, we'll send it to you as a PDF, an ebook, so you'll have it as material for this training. But here I want to say that if the strategy is one-sided, it's not enough to achieve learning outcomes. The teacher or faculty member at Al-Qasim University must diversify this strategy. If you have a question, Dr. Amira or Dr. Lulu, feel free to ask. Since Dr. Lulu is the last colleague, Dr. Lulu Alawais, you can ask me. You might ask me, Dr. Abdul Rahman, is it okay to use more than one strategy in a single class? Absolutely. There's no problem with diversifying your strategies. You can use a lecture and a discussion in the same class. Even if you're in a face-to-face setting, you can use a different approach for discussions or even give them a task that relies on research. To achieve learning outcomes and outputs, the professor or faculty member at Qasim University must diversify this strategy. Dr. Amira or Dr. Lulu might ask me, since Dr. Lulu is the last colleague, Dr. Lulu Alawais, you can ask me, Dr. Abdul Rahman, if it's okay to use more than one strategy in a single class. It's fine with diversifying your strategies. You can use a lecture and a discussion in the same class. You can use another discussion approach. E.g., if a student is looking for information and presenting it, I could use a Q&A format or any other method. The important thing is to be mindful of the individual differences among learners. As a professor, you should consider these individual differences. If one strategy fails, then you need to diversify your strategies and choose more than one during your teaching. The important thing is that we are careful. I need to consider the individual differences among learners. The slide in front of us summarizes that as a university professor, you should take these individual differences into account and not rely on just one strategy. If that one strategy doesn't help you achieve your goals, then you need to diversify your strategies and choose more than one during your teaching. Okay? So, the individual differences among learners all affect their level of achievement. For example, one student might understand in a certain way, or absorb information from the teacher in a specific manner, while another student relies on a different approach. Our goal here is to recognize these individual differences. We need to consider and recognize individual differences. This is, of course, done through the analysis that is conducted on the learners at the beginning. In institutions that focus on this matter, the previous learning outcomes should be clear to us. We have e-learning in the outcomes. We have traditional learning. For example, the courses on the ladder in psychology were taught traditionally before, and it's taught electronically